Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In Hadith Research, today's our topic is Jarh and Ta'dil. Jarh means unacceptability and Ta'dil means acceptable narrator. So this is the topic, how we identified the names of persons, whether they are reliable persons or unreliable persons. To start it, I just share an example that this is the format in Hadith reports that first chain of narrators is mentioned the names of persons, and of every name of persons you can identify about the reliability of that person. And then you can also conduct the content as well to match with the Quran and logic, and then you make a decision that whether such report is authentic or not. But today's our focus on Jarh and Ta'dil means acceptable or unacceptable narrators audit. This is the topic. Definition is Jarh and Ta'dil is the procedure of identifying which narrators are reliable persons and which are not reliable persons. The word Jarh means unacceptable person. Ta'dil means acceptable person. And condition of acceptable, reliable persons, how we can identify. First, you see for reliability, what you check that the ethical reputation of a person, whether he was a Muslim, adult person, intelligent person, not reputation of unethical activities, and not biased about political party or sectarianism. So if you get it, yes, so then it means the person is a reliable person. The other, it's the opposite is recording capacity. Zabt. Zabt means that not report against reports of his class fellows. Not lost memory. Not lot of mistakes. Not careless person. Not confused persons. So you'll have to check the negative attributes of that person, that whether he reports his reports are the same which his class fellows get the same reports from the same teacher, or one student get a report but other class fellows did not understood about it from the teacher, so it's not possible. So that's why you have to check. We also check that how was the memory of that person. Lot of mistakes he did, or minor mistakes, okay, that's normal. But a lot of mistakes a person is doing, so then it means he had some confusion. Whether he was a careless person or not, or whether he was a confused person or not. So all these things you'll have to check about that person. How to confirm which narrator was a reliable person? As I have explained you earlier in previous lectures, that narrators become celebrity during 11 Hijri to 250 Hijri period, 632 to 864 CE. So many people to give money as credit or taking marriage, you need to identify whether such persons are reliable or not. So that's why to get the reputation, people conducted these hadith reports. So that's why we need to check them. And how to confirm reliability of each narrator. Comments of researchers about each narrators, we can do it, because all such narrators lived at around 11 to 250 Hijri, which is 632 to 864 CE period, and definitely now 1200 years more than that are done. So we cannot go to visit these persons and get information, so it's not possible. But at their time, the researchers, they conducted interview with them. They also conducted interview of their class fellows, their children, grandchildren, about them, and asked about everything. So that's why they have combined all the result, and that's available to us, so we can just read it, and that's it. We can understand it, that which person is a reliable person and which is not. So this interview of narrator and interview of their friends, class fellows of narrators, all it is done by their hadith researchers, which is called muhaddithin. They also conducted interviews of their children, grandchildren, neighbors, etc., to get some comments about some dead narrator as well, to understand that what was the reputation of that person. Overall reputation of narrators, especially in his town, and then consensus about the reputation of the narrators. For example, some scholars, Malik, Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, Ahmad bin Hanbal, Sufyan Suri, Sufyan ibn Ayniya, Uzay, all these are very celebrity persons, so every person can give comment about them, and most of them, all of them, give positive comments. So means all these are reliable persons. I just, as an example, I have shared. In case of different comments, we need to recheck about the person who gives comments and what are the reasons about it. Ibn Abdul Barr, he was a scholar. His time was 463 Hijri, 1071 CE period. He said that if a narrator was not an unreliable person, he did not consider as biased person. He was not extremism. His reputation was not about part of a political or sectarianism, then he will be considered as a reliable person. So this, like he has mentioned, so this was the method of hadith researchers about the narrators. So the result, it happens that if all researchers agreed about reliability of a person or unreliability of a person, then it's okay for you. You can confirm that okay, this person is reliable, this is not reliable. In case of conflict in different researchers, then we should avoid that narrator, because it means that some researcher give negative comments about him, so that's better to avoid that person. So just to improve the quality of your research, how to know about memory of narrators, because researchers, when they conducted interviews, he also checked the memory of narrators. So he asked the questions that if the narrator is live, then you can check his record, like his or her diary, etc. Like if it is available, just to check it. And if the person is live, so then conduct interview, and they can understand it that his memory is good, or his memory is lost, whatever it is. How did the narrator, Mr. A, handled his diary? If we know that Mr. A keep diary, and although Mr. A is died, but his diaries exist available, so then the researchers can check it, review it. That's okay. If all his reports match with his diary, then it's okay. It means that Mr. A was a reliable person. But if we find that Mr. A has given reports, but such reports are negative reports available in the diary, then it means that Mr. A had some confusion or he has some problem. Almost all the reports of Mr. A match with reports of his class fellows as well, then it means that memory of Mr. A was okay. And also it's mentioned that his class fellows' memory is also good. But if you find conflict with class fellows, then it means that some person has some problem. If we find a conflict of reports, except minor mistakes between class fellows, then such person's memory is not good. But normal mistakes, minor mistakes is okay. That's normal for all human persons. But a lot of errors we find it, then it means that the person's memory has problem. If the narrator, Mr. A, does not wrote reports in diary, how was his memory? Whether his, if he did not write in a diary, whether his memory was lost in some accident or not. So we can ask from his children or friends or class fellows or colleagues about them. Was his memory was good at old age, or his memory was lost as old age, and was there any accident happened with Mr. A? All these things, this interview was conducted about Mr. A when that especially researcher, he go to his city or village and conducted interview with Mr. A himself or his next generation as well about reputation of Mr. A. Can you accept comments of researchers without providing reasons? Now your question will be. So decision that he or she is acceptable if it is mentioned ta'dil. Ta'dil means he is acceptable. If all the researchers consider a narrator Mr. A as a reliable person and they did not provide reasons, then it means that overall it is acceptable person. Okay. If different comments are available, then they should provide detailed reasons must be there. And the decision that he is unacceptable, Jarh means unacceptable, then the researcher should consider a narrator Mr. A is unreliable person, then such researcher must provide reasons why. What was his accident, or he was a biased person, or he was a sectarianist, or he was a part of political party, or what was his activities he has done. So all things you have to read it. If different opinions of researchers, then we should not acceptability of that narrator, because it become better to avoid that person. We must review the reliability of the content as well. If such reports content has conflict with the Quran, ethics and logic, then we should not accept such report because such reports are the source of Muslim sectarianism. Usually, whenever you will find any report which is against the Quran or ethics or logic, then it is in fact a spam report. And usually this is done by some sectarianism. You will find it. For this investigation and audit in the Quran, God has explained us that you should investigate. This is sermon of Quran, Al-Hujurat. You can read it. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in ja'akum fasiqun binaba'in fatabayyanu an tusibu qawman bijahalatin fatusbihu ala ma fa'altum nadimin wa'alamu anna fikum rasulallah لو يطيعكم في كثير من الأمر لعنتم ولكن الله حبب إليكم الإيمان وزينه في قلوبكم وكره إليكم الكفر والفسوق والعصيان أولئك هم الراشدون فضلا من الله ونعمة والله عليم حكيم. Believers, if any unreliable person comes to you with an important news, fully investigate it. Overwhelmed, it may happen that due to emotions you attack other persons, then later you feel ashamed of what you did. You should know that Allah's Prophet exists among you. It is not appropriate attitude that you insist on your opinions against the Prophet. If the Prophet accepts your advice, in many cases you will end up in great difficulty. But Allah has created love in your mind about faith to you, and you don't like disbelief, wrongdoing, and disobedience to the Prophet. These persons are rightly guided so that they are benefiting from the favor from God. So that these persons are able to get grace in favor of Allah because Allah is knowledgeable and wise. Then God further explained that in case of a conflict within Muslims, then what you should do. وَإِن طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا فَإِن بَغَتْ إِحْدَاهُمَا عَلَى الْأُخْرَى فَقَاتِلُوا الَّتِي تَبْغِي حَتَّى تَفِيَ إِلَى أَمْرِ اللَّهِ فَإِن فَاءَتْ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا بِالْعَدْلِ وَاقْسِطُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. Your unity must remain together. If two groups of the believers take up arms against each other, you must reconcile between them. Then if one of the groups is unjust to the other, wage war against the unjust group until it turns to Allah's verdict. Then if they turns, reconcile between the two groups with justice and very fair way. Surely Allah befriends the just persons. Believers, they are brothers to one another. Therefore, reconcile between two brothers and keep care of Allah, because you become able to get mercy. You may find right now in Muslim groups some sectarianisms. They give alms, or they also conducted debates in YouTube and Facebook. So we should avoid them and we should try to reconcile them, so that we must become as our brothers. Then God further explained the attitude during other persons, what you should be careful. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكن خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن اسم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم. Believers, it is the requisite of this brotherhood that neither your men should make fun of other persons. It may be possible that they are better than them. Similarly, your woman should not make fun of other women because it may be better than others. You should not slander your persons nor give bad names to another. All these are wrongdoings, and after faith, even the name of wrongdoing is evil. Those persons who don't repent even after this warning, they will be unjust persons. Believers refrain from too much guess about other persons because some guess may become sins. Don't spy on others and don't indulge in backbiting one another persons. Is there anyone among you who would like to eat the meat of his dead brother? Therefore, you don't tolerate this, then why should spy and backbiting be tolerated? Fear God. Allah surely is quick in accepting repentance because He is ever merciful. On this basis, you can just read the reports about narrators. So you can see that researchers that they conducted without any bias, they did not conduct any guess and spy. No, they just without any bias they give comments about his class fellows and friends and brothers, and whatever results they get it, they have mentioned in their reports. So this was their excellent practice they have done in Hadith research and narrators as well. Any positive, any negative, whatever information they got it, they mentioned in their books. God further explained that you should avoid bias. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. People, if you don't regard one another to be brothers, you will remain inflicted with these evils. Therefore, fully understand that we have created you from a single man and a single woman, and we have divided you into families and tribes from your just recognize. In reality, the most honored among you in the sight of Allah is the one person who is the most pious. He will judge persons on the day of judgment on base of their performance. Surely Allah is all knowing and all wise. So we can understand it that we should not conduct any bias with any narrator, with any person. Without any bias, we should conduct research. So in this audit procedure of reliability of narrators, what you should do, can we accept comments of one researcher? You should have to check if a researcher provided detailed reasons, then it is okay. Otherwise, we should get comments and reasons provided by other researchers as well, so that you can make a consolidated result you can get about that narrator. If we find differences in case of different researchers, that if one researcher accept a narrator and other researchers does not accept about the same narrators, we should avoid such narrator just for quality of your security. We review the reasons provided by all other researchers, and if detailed reasons are not provided, then we should avoid that narrator, because the reports about the Prophet, may Allah bless him, are important to confirm whether it is authentic or not. That's why we should avoid such narrators. The reasons must be reviewed to Jarh or Ta'dil. Jarh means any negative comments, and Ta'dil means acceptability. So you'll have to check everything. If one researchers disagree with other researchers, then both reasons must be reviewed, and then you'll have to make a decision. We must review the content of different reports of the same narrators, and as I have shared with the websites, that all the reports about that narrator, all the bibliographies available. If a researcher informed that Mr. A was a biased due to political or sectarianism, then his reports must not be accepted. If it is found that Mr. A hid any error, then we must avoid reports from Mr. A, because it was a confusion or some bias might be available. This is classification levels of reliability about each narrator. If he has some ta'dil, we means reliability is available, then these comments will be available. Fula asbatul hadith, which means extreme reliable person. Sika means he was reliable person. Suduk means that's okay, which means reliable but not very good reliable, but okay, that's okay. Fula salih al hadith, which means reliable but he might have weaknesses. And these comments are also there, very weak person may be there. So you can see that how this is the classification of reliability. And for unreliability, jarh, you will find negative comments will be there, up to some extent weak. Fula lean al hadith, which means that he has a lot of weak reports. La yahtaj bi, unreliable persons, it means simply. Zaif jidda, very weak person. Fula matham bil kazab, which means accused of lying. And then the extreme situation is yada means that the extreme liar person. So based on this, you can identify that how much reliability about that the person. For every person, whatever these comments, these whatever in these words, you will find it, and then you can consider his hanging, that how much he is reliable, or if he is an unreliable, then up to some extent you can find it. These are the books of Jarh wa Ta'dil. For example, Bukhari, his book is At-Tarikh al-Kabir. In this, he gives bibliography of a lot of narrators he have done. So you can find it. Then further books of Ibn Abi Hatim, Ibn al-Habban, Ibn Adi, Ibn Uday, Abdul Ghani, Zahabi, Ibn Hajar. So in these books they have consolidated, but you don't need to download all of the books, because in the software of this Islamic Hadith website you can find all of the books where, and then you can select in the name of the each narrator person. So all the result you can get it. All this you must have to check. This is a modern method of fraud triangle, that every person conduct a fraud. They must have three things: opportunity to conduct fraud, some pressure, and then also giving justification as well. Because a poor internal control is there, it means that a person has an opportunity to conduct fraud. Management override of internal control and collusion between persons, so it becomes easy to purchase some things and conduct any fraud, and collusion between employees and third parties, and as a result of that fraud happens. You can see that in this modern methods are the same in this which muhaddis scholars have conducted the reliability of narrators. This fraud investigation process, usually you can find it that the first phase is collect red flags, then collect enough evidence, then perform detailed investigation, and then the final result is the issue fraud investigation report. So first important thing happen at the red flags. What is red flags? That the personal activities, like an employee lifestyle changes. For example, a person has a very less salary, but he purchase huge expensive cars or jewelries or homes or clothes. So how he or she get huge money? How? So then with the red flags you start investigation. Significant personal debts and credit problems. If a person, it means he may happen as a result of a fraud to avoid to pay all the loan. Behavioral changes if happens of a person. For example, if he become indication of drugs, alcohol, gambling, etc., then it may happen that he may conduct a fraud. High employee turnover, especially in those areas which are more vulnerable to fraud. For example, a cashier, and cashiers every week change. Why it happens? So these cashiers may conduct some frauds. Refusal to take vacation or sick leave. Why? This is very normally it does not happen, and if a special person is doing it means something is confusion, some to check it. Lack of segregation of duties in especially the vulnerable areas. Vulnerable areas, for example, in a cache, carrying unusually large sums of money, easily annoyed at reasonable questioning, borrowing money from co-workers. So this is modern examples, and you can see the same interviews were conducted by Hadith researchers. They have done so. That's why they have given his their whatever reports they have wrote. This is available to you. In management fraud as well, this may happen in a company. Some directors conduct a fraud. Reluctance to provide information to auditors. Managers engage in frequent disputes with auditors. Management decisions are dominated by an individual or small groups. If you find these things, so these are the red flags. Red flags means just as an indicator that where you should conduct investigation as an auditor. Frequent changes in bank accounts. So auditors these conducted similar methods the at old time Hadith researchers they have done so. Excessive number of years and transactions. High employees turnover rate, which means there is some problem in a company. Service contracts result in no products. So why it happens? It means there is some problems in this company. Photocopied or missing documents. So here in Hadith, you can see the example that the missing name of a narrator is mentioned. It means that he was a suspicious person. That's why his name is not mentioned there. So there might be something to conduct investigation. So that's why people we conduct next steps in investigation will have to do this, collect enough evidence to initiate detailed investigation, like for example performance analytical procedures, observe the suspected persons, and they don't disclose that you are conducting an investigation, and after gathering enough evidence then they provide the detailed reports as a result of that. So this may happen. So the same it was done around 1200 years ago. Researchers they have done. As I have shared the name of this website, this is not the one website, there are many other, but this is the quality of this website is the best. So that's why I have mentioned here that for every narrator it is mentioned that what is this person, what is his bibliography, and what about whether he was a reliable person or whether unacceptable person or even a liar person or he was a scholar person or whether he was a reliable person, whatever about it. So just the name of that person will there. First you'll have to search it. With the search then you'll have to click on that, and then you can find it that there this is the name person or lady, and this is especially about if you don't understand in Arabic you can translate it in English and you can understand it. For example, you can see this Abdullah bin Abdul Malik. He was a companion. And al-laqab means the title, his title was Abi al-Lahab, al-Lahab. And his death time is mentioned 8 Hijri. It means that before Prophet, during life of Prophet, he got death. Another person, Adam bin Abdurrahman, we say it's written as Siqa. Siqa means reliable person. Another person, Adam bin Sulaiman, it's mentioned Siqa, reliable. Another person, Adam bin Ali, it's mentioned Suduq, Hasan al-Hadith. That is, it is up to some extent reliable person, which means that that's okay person. But not very reliable, but okay, this is okay. Then Amna bintul Hakam, she was a companion. And this lady was taught, they get knowledge from the Prophet ﷺ. Then another lady was Amna bint Abdullah, but it's mentioned Majhul al-Hal, the unknown about that lady. We don't know. So which means simply that we don't know whether she was reliable or not, so we cannot take any action. Then you will see, like for example with Adam bin Abdurrahman, Muhammad bin Shuaib, its name. So this especially the family tree is mentioned. This advantage of this is that if the same name of other persons, but with the especially the family tree will be different, so that's why you can identify it. And that person's, his fame is also mentioned, and also mentioned about his descent and his tribes, and then mention whether its ranking, that whether he was Siqa means reliable person, and then it's mentioned that he lived in these different cities from Israel, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan is right now is in, his death happened at Asqalan. Asqalan city happened is Turkmenistan. And also mention his Maula means his relative person's its name. And then his students' names and his teachers' names are mentioned. And this Al-Jarh wa Ta'dil, which means negative and positive comments of researchers about that. So you can see that this is the names of these students and teachers, and on each teacher or each student you can click and check it whether these persons are reliable or not. And then especially this Al-Jarh wa Ta'dil, it is mentioned, different researchers mentioned, and you can say that almost all of them mentioned that this Abdurrahman was a reliable person. So which means that's okay, that's good. So in this way, for the same persons you can get it. I have mentioned you already that you should conduct, first you should install Arabic keyboard in your computer, and then link of this website open, and here you can find it search, which is written Abhas. There you will search especially some keyword in that report. So a lot of reports on the same topics you will find in the different books. Then you will click one by one and read it, and then every report you will find the narrators. You can check it that for which report is authentic, which is not authentic, and as a result, after the end of your research of the same topic, you can find that this is reliable or not. This Aqra al-Hadith means read the report. You can find it. So whatever questions appear in your mind, feel free to ask me in the email. So thanks a lot. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.